It has. Here we go.
There we go. There we go. Okay, so here we are. It is, I almost went with April again. I don't know why April's on my brain today, but today is November 3rd, 2021.
It is.
Yes, it's the first week of November already. And we have our time change this weekend. So it's going to be like getting dark at like 5:30, 5:45.
Yes,
Good quilting season.
it is.
It is, yes. I'll talk more about the quilt later. Okay, so I am Margaret Major, and I am a registered counseling therapist here at the After Trauma Empowerment Network in Shubenacadie, Nova Scotia. I am joined with Vida Woodworth, who is co-host and chairperson on our board of directors here at ATTEND. Kate Matthews is here. She is our technical director. She keeps track of things behind the scenes. And we are joined with Maureen Googoo. We're going to talk to Maureen, an award-winning journalist, and I'm sure we're going to learn lots from her. Yes, so first I will do our diversity welcome that we always do, and then we'll do a check-in with Vida and see how she's been doing the past week, and then we'll have a chat with Maureen after I talk about the NHL for a few minutes. Okay, so I'd like to welcome all women, men, transgender, and other identified individuals here today. I'd like to welcome everyone here who is a mother, father, sister, brother, auntie, uncle, cousin, son, daughter, grandmother, or grandfather. Welcome. I welcome people of all races, tribes, and descents. I welcome your bodies, your minds, and your energy. I welcome survivors and those who support them. I welcome all people single, married, partnered, dating, celibate, or involved in whatever sort of relationship is right for you. Welcome gay, lesbian, bisexual, heterosexual, queer, asexual, two-spirited, and others for whom none of those current labels fit. I welcome your emotions, your joy, your bliss, your disappointment, your frustration, anger, sadness, and peace. I welcome everyone's special way of understanding and knowing the world, whether it is wisdom that has been learned in schools, universities, colleges, and/or the deep and profound school of life. I welcome those living with chronic medical conditions, visible and invisible. I welcome mystics, seekers, and believers of all kinds. I welcome people who identify as activists, community leaders, musicians, artists, group members, and those who don't. And finally, I'd like to welcome the ancestors who lived in this land where we are now. Welcome the spirits of Mi'kmaq, the natives who lived in this area before the Europeans came. I'd like to acknowledge them and invite their spirits to this space. Everyone, welcome. There.
Yes.
And after a welcome, thank you for being here. And with that thanks and that gratitude, we also want to extend that to the Mental Health Foundation of Nova Scotia for their financial support for this program for our MAAT sessions that we do. We're always very grateful to the Mental Health Foundation of Nova Scotia. Okay, so Vida.
Yes, Margaret.
How are you doing today? And how's your past week been?
Good. It went very quickly. It just seems we were here last Wednesday and now we're back again.
I know.
Yeah, so it's I can't think of anything I always say that, and then I think of 100 things, but I can't really think of anything too new or exciting. I know you're going to talk a bit about, I guess we started talking about last week about what's going on in the NHL. So I'll kind of wait to hear what you have to say. Yeah, it's just been a lot of stuff going on, and a lot of things that when you see what's going on, you start, oh, we should be doing this, or we could be doing that. So yeah, I can't think of anything other than today I took my 2 puppies, my little boy puppy and my little girl puppy, and they had their operations, and they're at home recovering now with their nan who's babysitting. And yeah, so I can't think of anything else. Halloween was wet and windy, but we had close to 200 people where I live, and I gave away almost all that candy, Margaret. There's still a little bit left, but not much.
You had quite a stash of candy, Violet.
I did.
I know.
I did, and I made plans thinking it would be mostly all left because of the weather, and I don't have a lot left, so maybe a little to have snacks on between now and Christmas, but yeah. So other than that, there were lots of very, very polite trick-or-treaters, and I even had one group of trick-or-treaters who gave me a treat. At the door. I got a lovely Mars bar. Yes. So
wow.
the trick-or-treaters were giving back, and that was,
that's heartwarming.
Yeah, it was very nice to see the kids of all ages, and everybody was, despite the weather, having a good time, and lots of thank yous, and yeah, so it was a nice evening. This is a new thing for me. I never used to enjoy Halloween, and now I'm trying to be a bit more in the mood, and I actually enjoyed giving out candy to all the little ones. So yeah, that was my excitement for the week.
Yes.
Yeah. So I can't think of anything.
Okay.
I know you've got a sticky full, so.
Oh, well, I can usually never fit everything on a sticky. I try to, but we'll see. Because so for me, as you mentioned, I just want to bring up the NHL, and I could talk about that for a month. All of the meetings that have been happening, and the awareness, the education, the lack of responsibility by some people. And I'm referring to Kyle Beach. So last week when we did the show, we were, at that time, we knew the person as John Doe.
Yes.
And John Doe was sexually assaulted at 21 years old by, I believe it was the video coach on the Blackhawks at the time. And while we were doing the show last week, there was a interview that Kyle Beach did where he came out and said that he was John Doe. And we didn't get to see that until after the show. So a lot has happened. A lot of conversations have happened in the past week since we did the show last week, because this is when Kyle went public. And the interview that he gave, Rick Westhead, I believe was his name. It's a heartbreaking, raw interview to watch. I've watched it 3 times, and I still tear up when I watch it. And the strength that Kyle and all other survivors that haven't come forward and may never come forward. There's a lot of different areas that we could go in regards to systemic bullshit that still exists, that needs to be eliminated. Power and control, this idea that it doesn't happen, and it's happening all the time, every day. It's happening right now. And it does happen to all genders, as Kyle's story clearly tells us. The one thing that I wanted to speak to, because I know in my 12 years of working with survivors of sexualized violence and trauma, something that comes up is a lot of survivors will hold a sense of responsibility when the person who assaulted them or violated them abuses somebody else after they've assaulted somebody. So in Kyle's interview, Rick asked him what he would say to the 16-year-old that in 2013 came forward and said that he had also experienced sexual assault by this coach. And Kyle broke down and bawled and apologized and said he was sorry and he didn't do more. And I've heard these words from so many people over my years of doing this work. And I just want to say to Kyle and to other survivors who hold that sense of somehow I'm responsible because I didn't say enough, I didn't fight enough, I didn't try enough to stop it. It's not your fault. It is not your responsibility. The onus is on the perpetrator who chooses to violate another person and touch them without their consent. And another person uses their power, uses manipulation or grooming. It's on the perpetrator, and in no way is it on the victim or the survivor. And it's a tough conversation to have with people, because people are very clever survivors at convincing themselves of the ways that they could have had more control and that they could have stopped it or prevented it from happening to someone else. The person who could have prevented it from happening is the person who chooses to use power and control over another person. And it takes a lot of sessions with somebody of breaking this down, exploring this, kind of, dissecting it for them to understand, because often people hold this in for years and years before they will disclose. Most people won't disclose to somebody. They won't go talk to someone about it. They will hold it and they will carry the shame that goes with it. I just had a new client this week, and in an hour-long session, there was eye contact maybe 4 times. When somebody can't make eye contact with me, especially in a first session, it's very shame-based. And you can tell that that person is carrying so much shame. And I gotta kind of be careful about how far I go, because I can get stuck in this there's so much I want to say. And I just need to kind of be careful about getting off on this and getting off on that. It's the main point is the responsibility is on the perpetrator.
Yeah.
And I can say so much more about it.
Yeah. There's a lot, and there's a lot of emotion for whether it's a male or female, or however that person identifies their gender. They have been targeted by someone who wants to use their power and position for their own personal sexual gratification, and they don't really care if they hurt another person. For Kyle and all the people that have come before him and that will come after, speaking out and taking, that big risk You will never know how many people you have helped by doing that, but how many people who finally know they're not alone for the first time because you spoke out. And I think I said this last week when we were talking, that, you know, there's probably many studies since I remember reading one of the first ones about people who, especially with sexual violence against children and young people, or anyone, you know, the average person who abuses children will, for sexual gratification, will have 80 to, it's either 200 or 300 victims before somebody is able to tell someone who understands the seriousness of what they're telling and that it's true. Yeah, there's the systems that are in place to allow these things to happen. You know, we're working on things, but it's still got a long way to go. Go to a hockey rink and stand outside the dressing room door. And, you know, you're probably going to hear some things that you thought you would never hear still happening. You know, coaches who are yelling at the team, using profanity, calling, you know, especially when it's a boys team, you know, you're playing like a girl. All those things that put down other groups of people. And, you know, so if there is a kid or a young person in there who is being targeted and being used by someone in a position of power over them, it's not surprising that they don't tell. Usually the person hurting them is somebody well respected. You know, they're a great coach, or they really like working with young people. Aren't they a marvelous person? And, you know, sometimes it's those things that keep us from digging that little bit deeper to find out what is potentially might be going on. So, yeah, it's hard not to want to talk about it all at once, but there's so many different factors. I mean, even just the whole idea of homophobia and the fact that, you know, this Kyle Beach was abused by another man. People then start, oh, well, you know, maybe he's gay or, you know, whatever. And so there's a lot of pressure, whatever his sexual orientation doesn't matter. He was forced to do something by someone he did not want to do it with. And that's not okay, whether you're an adult or a kid. And so, you know, we need to stop making excuses for the person committing the crime and start having them take responsibility and not the people that they're hurting. Yeah.
And just this, I had this thought. I've had this thought several times. I have said it out loud at home, but I'd like to just put it out there right now. So in hockey, in soccer, I've seen it in baseball, basketball, probably all sports. When people tap someone's butt, like great shot, tap, tap, that has to stop. You can't be doing that to people. Given the statistics we know about sexual abuse and sexual assault, that would be highly triggering for people that have experienced that unwanted touch. So I know, well, it's just, you know, what's the big deal? It's just an ass slap. And it's like, that is so triggering for people that have experienced a sexual violation or trauma. So I just want to say, stop with the ass pats, like in sports. There doesn't need to be any of that at all. Yeah. And I'm gonna say that again at some other point down the road about it, because we need to stop with the ass slaps.
Yes. And there used to be
ass slap.
we could make a lovely t-shirt.
We will.
Yeah. The other thing too, I learned, I didn't know what it was, but it was bag tagging. And it was when you take a wet towel usually and snap usually a guy on his penis or in that area.
Yes.
And, you know, those kinds of things are sometimes supposed to be funny or I don't know if it's establishing hierarchy in the room somehow, you know, I can do this to 3 guys and nobody did it to me or whatever.
Yeah.
But it is, you know, it's not comfortable. I mean, come on, even in fun, it's not fun to have, you know, a wet towel on your butt cheek or any other part of your body. And for someone who has been touched, you know, without giving consent, those are all reminders and triggers.
Yeah.
And, you know, people stop playing sports and doing things that they used to love to do because of something like that that makes them feel unsafe. And yeah, you don't need to be able to, you know, snap somebody's butt with a wet towel or your hand. It doesn't improve your game skills or anything else. I know they say it's trying to build up the team, but I think we could do some things that are a bit more team building than, you know, trying to pick on the weakest person in the room. So yeah, I agree with that. I mean, knuckle bumps maybe, or I don't know.
Yeah.
Every day it changes what you do. And but yeah, there can be ways that we can congratulate each other and show our support without touching each other.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. We should probably press pause on this conversation. And
yes, I think so, because we got
our guests, because
yes,
we could, you know, be 9:30 tonight by then. I'd still be going on about something.
And poor Maureen would probably be asleep with her husband.
Yes.
No, I found this conversation very interesting.
Welcome, Maureen. I didn't really have a chance to say award-winning journalist Maureen Googoo, proud Mi'kmaq from Sabaganakini First Nation. What else? Owner, editor, Independent Indigenous News.
Yes, that's actually yeah. My website is it's called Googoo West News, and yeah, just to give you a little explainer there, Googoo West in Mi'kmaq means owl, and it's actually a variation of my last name, which is Googoo. So that's where Googoo West News comes from.
Awesome.
Oh, that's cool.
There, look, you haven't even been on for a minute and I've learned from you already.
And you pronounce it basically, you know, the way you pronounce my last name, Googoo, and you put Gwes at the end, so it's Googoo Gwes.
Googoo Gwes.
Yeah, cool. But it's spelled using the Smith Francis orthography. Bernie Francis, part of the writing of the Mi'kmaq language that he developed. With another individual, I can't remember his first name, but his last name is Smith. So that's why it's spelled with a K, but you do pronounce it as Googoo Gwes.
Ah, Googoo.
All right.
I like it. Yeah. New word. There are 3 new words today, Maureen. I learned 3 new words today.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, so I've been running Googoo West News for the past 6 years.
Has it been that long? Wow.
It has been. Time flies when you're having fun.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm just before we start asking you questions about your I guess journalist path, is there any thoughts that you want to weigh in on the conversation Biden and I were just having?
Well, the thing is, I mean, you were talking about, and I've been following that story and been following it on the news. It's been getting a lot of national coverage. You know, I think today's coverage was about the talks with his lawyers and the team's lawyers about what kind of compensation he should be given because of lost wages, and that was the story today. But it really got me thinking about another story that was actually in the news today, involving a professor and a priest at University of King's College. I think his name is Wayne Hankey.
Yes.
It was a major investigative piece done by CBC reporter Francis Willick, and it's really, I mean, if you go to the CBC website and read the story, it's, you know, you have a lot of people who experienced sexual abuse, alleged sexual abuse, and they're telling their story about how this affected them. And this happened like way back in the 1970s.
Oh, I
So
haven't heard that.
so it really, it was on CBC this morning, which prompted me. It really woke me up listening to, because it was part of my alarm. But when I heard the story, it was really compelling. And then I went on the website and read the entire story on the website. And it, like I said, these stories aren't isolated. There's a lot of stories out there, like you were talking about, Margaret, that these, one person talks and then another person comes out. It's just, more and more people are realizing that, that this is wrong. And it also kind of harks to a few years ago when I was covering missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. A lot of the stories that the women were telling when the inquiry came to Membertou First Nation, I covered that, the hearings that happened there, and a lot of the stories of the women about, some of them, they talked about domestic abuse, they talked about sexual abuse, they talked about what they were running away from. So listening to Cal Beach's story just kind of reminded me of what the story today, but also reminded me of some of the stories that I've covered for my website over the years, and just how traumatizing it is. But it is also about, there's something about being able to tell your story that's really healing, and it allows you to move forward. And that's sort of what I was thinking about when I was hearing the story, like, with Cal Beach, he's telling his story, it's not just to let other people know, but it's also, it's part of the healing process.
Yeah. Thank you for weighing in.
Yeah.
And I guess that's part of my whole, my website. It's to give people like that an outlet to share their stories.
Yeah. It's almost, I've heard people say it's almost cathartic when you do tell your story, or you even just, feel safe enough to tell a part of it. And it's almost like taking some of those emotions that have been inside and externalizing it, either by saying it out loud or by writing it, or drawing it or whatever. But it's a way to take it away from inside of you and take it and put it out. And it's a step towards that healing journey that most people will take at some point.
Yeah. Okay, so Maureen, we could talk to you all night about your journey to get to where you're at today. Could you share, I guess, a little bit? I kind of know some from our conversation the other week, but just, I guess, share a little bit about how you got to where you are today.
Oh boy.
I know.
This journey, I should tell people, I've been a journalist for my entire adult life, since I turned 18. I got into, I should let you know, when I was in high school, I was a nerd, and my goal was just to go to university. I didn't know what I wanted to study, but my big goal was just, I wanted to go to university and get a degree. So even when I was in senior high and in grade 12, I still couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. But it was maybe about a few weeks before graduation, somebody came up to me and said, hey, the Micmac News is hiring summer students. Maybe you should apply. So I did. And I went for the job interview. And about 2-3 days before graduation, I actually got the job. So I got a job, and the job basically was, write news stories and take pictures for the Micmac News during the summer months. And, that whole summer, I had a blast. I loved it. I just biked around my community with my 10-speed, with a backpack, with a notebook, my camera that my dad bought at a used 35mm camera he bought at Tarzan Mosier for me, and a tape recorder. And I just biked around the community, just talking to people, and writing stories and doing profiles. And I got to cover the summer games, the the Native Summer Games that happened every summer, and this one was held in Buddledeck. At the time, they called themselves Chapel Island, but I got to cover the sporting event, and like I said, I had a blast, and it was that summer that I decided that I wanted to be a journalist. But by then, I had already enrolled at St. Mary's. My initial plan was maybe I can get into commerce and get a business degree. But by the time I got there, I just said I did not want to do that. I want to go to journalism school. And so I spent my first year at St. Mary's just taking all the introductory courses, but my goal was to use those clippings that I had at MAAT News and apply for and transfer into the journalism program at the University of King's College. And I did apply, but I didn't get accepted. And that was a bit devastating for me. And it was a little bit of a setback, but when I said, well, listen, they have a 1-year program too. So I just need to get a degree and then I can apply again. So that's what I did. I stayed at St. Mary's. I studied political science. And during that time, I guess another person suggested that maybe I should apply for a summer job at CBC if I really wanted to be a journalist. So I did. I applied for a job back in 1990. And instead of getting a summer job, I was actually offered a 1-year paid internship working at CBC Radio in Halifax.
Wow.
So that meant if I wanted to take the internship, I actually had to leave school for a year, which I did. And I loved it. I fell in love with broadcast journalism and radio, working in radio. I worked in the newsroom. I worked in current affairs. I actually worked on a couple of news stories. I did a 10-minute documentary on, of all things, the fire department in my community. It was a feature documentary about how the fire department in Indian Brook First Nation, help youth do something and encourage them to do other things other than just being up to no good. And it was a fun documentary, and I learned a lot of skills. But the thing that I learned the most was that as a Mi'kmaq person working in journalism at that time, that a lot of my colleagues really didn't take me seriously. And it really highlighted the fact that I needed to get a degree. And at that time, I didn't even have my first degree, much less a journalism one. So when that year was up, I went back to school in 91, finished my degree at St. Mary's, and then it became time to apply again. And then I applied to the 1-year program at King's. So at this point, I had a better resume at this time. I actually had not just clippings, but I actually had a demo reel that I could submit as part of my application. But at the same time, I was thinking, well, why should I just apply to King's? Maybe I should apply to another journalism school. So I applied to Ryerson Journalism School in Toronto. They had a similar program, but instead of it being 1 year, it was a 2-year program for university graduates. So I applied to both. And instead of getting rejected from both, this time I got accepted at both. And, and so, totally reversed from what happened to me, 4 years earlier. I actually had a choice, and I decided that I was going to go to Ryerson. So from 92 to 94, I studied journalism at Ryerson. I specialized in broadcast journalism. And on the weekends, I was working at the CBC National Radio Newsroom as an editorial assistant. And again, these were, this was just, incredible opportunities that just kind of fell into my lap. And I feel really fortunate when I hear about other journalism students and how they're struggling and the way the job market is now. I really count my blessings that these things happened to me at that time when I was that young. I was only 21, 22, 23 when all of this happened. So it really set me on a path of getting into journalism. And I should kind of point back that, right from the beginning, I always wanted to cover Indigenous news. And my initial goal was that I was going to go to journalism school. I was going to get a journalism degree, and I was going to come back to MAAT News and be the editor of Micmac News.
Mhm.
That was the goal.
Yeah.
But what happened during that time was Micmac News actually folded.
Oh.
They relied heavily on government funding. So when the government funding got cut, they couldn't maintain publication just based on the advertising and the subscription rates that they had. So I think they only were able to survive for a year, and then they folded. So, and that was back in 1991. So, since then, until my website came along, there really wasn't that kind of independent journalistic voice in the Atlantic region. Micmac News was it, and then it was gone.
Wow.
And for me, I had to think about, well, I still want to cover Indigenous news. I still want to tell those stories.
Yeah.
But, the only opportunities I had for employment then was working in mainstream media. And again, I was really fortunate that I wound up, I worked at the Chronicle Herald in Halifax, and I worked in the Halifax newsroom. I worked in the Dartmouth Bureau. I worked in the Truro Bureau. I worked at CBC in Halifax and Toronto. And, I worked briefly in Northern Saskatchewan for CBC. And, and those times that I worked with those media outlets, it always felt like at first they were encouraging me to cover Indigenous stories. And I really loved it. And especially the first summer I worked at the Chronicle Herald, I actually, got a couple of front page stories that were about Indigenous, stories that made it on the front page. And I'm incredibly proud of those stories.
Yeah.
And, and it was great, but it got to a point in both media outlets where I worked that people were kind of telling me, well, okay, you like covering these stories, but why don't you cover something else? Why don't you, cover other stories? I kind of felt like they were kind of discouraging me. It's not to say that I didn't do those stories. I did, but my goal in journalism was just to cover Indigenous news.
Yeah.
And it was really tough doing that, and it kind of reached a point in my career where, I was basically being told that, if I continued on, and I'll quote from a particular editor, if I continued on with this native kick, then I would never be considered for promotion. I would never get prestigious beats like legislature or city hall, and it would just hurt my career. And it was really discouraging and disheartening to hear that. So back in 98, I actually decided to take a step back from working in mainstream media. I actually left and I did public relations communications for a Native organization at the time called the Union of Nova Scotia Indians. So I kind of took a break and I started working for them. And I'm kind of glad that I did, because it kind of gave me a better insight of how current events happen, or what are the pressing issues in Indigenous communities in this region, what's really important. And it kind of gave me sort of an insight in who are the contacts. And I really treasure that time, but at the same time, what happened was the union was one of two political organizations that represented Donald Marshall Jr. in the 1999 fishing rights case. Well, when that ruling came down and the story started breaking in Burnt Church, I was the point person for the organization for other media outlets. So I was basically setting up interviews and hooking them up with other people to interview. And, there was meetings after meetings going on, and, I was fielding calls, and it just really made me miss journalism so much. And fortunately, around that time, in September 1999, the Aboriginal People's Television Network just started airing. They just went on the air. And when they did that, they actually put out on their website, like I went to their website and noticed that they had some job postings. Well, one of those postings was for a Halifax correspondent to work in this newsroom that they were just starting to form. And for me, it was like, they wanted a Halifax correspondent. They wanted somebody to report on Indigenous issues in Atlantic Canada for a national news show. So I applied and I got the job, and I can't describe the experience, but they flew me out to Winnipeg for training. Basically, they brought the newsroom that they formed, they brought together in Winnipeg for about a month to not just get us trained on just TV journalism skills, but also to start shaping out what the news show was going to look like, what kind of stories we were going to cover, what kind of angles were we going to take from them. And, it wasn't just, just getting the job, but I actually had an input on what was going to be reported and how we were going to report it. And, there's not many opportunities for journalists these days to be at the start of something really huge. And like I said, I cherished that whole time I was in Winnipeg while we were kind of hashing out what our news show was going to look like.
Yeah.
And in the early days, the Halifax News Bureau was my bedroom in Indian Brook First Nation. We didn't have an office. But I was on the road a lot. One of the first stories I actually covered was the logging rights trial that was going on, dealing with Mi'kmaq rights. And the second story was dealing with, Bird Church going out and, like the fishers from, I should not say Bird Church anymore. I should say Eskinobitich. And the fishers there were going out to fish and practicing their moderate livelihood fishery. Yeah. And, so basically I got to cover I actually got my wish and my dream of covering Indigenous issues on a full-time basis. And I got to do that for about 6.5 years. I opened the Halifax News Bureau for APTN, ran it during that time. I was like one of 2 reporters who worked there. When they asked me if I needed help, I actually, found another reporter who worked there a long time, Trina Roach. And, we were both just traveling the region because we were video journalists. We had to shoot and edit our own stories. We didn't have a camera person. We were the camera people. Yeah.
Wow.
It was really tiring. And, the downside of doing all that is that you get burnt out really quickly.
Yeah.
So I felt like I needed a break, but I decided that I wanted to get my master's in journalism. And so in 2006, I just decided, just on a whim, I think I was just exhausted and just had a bad day at work. And I just decided to look at the Columbia University website and just see when their deadline was for their master's program. And it was coming up. It was the end of December. And this was like the second week of December. I was looking at the website. So I applied. I just said, what the heck? I put together a demo reel, which was even more elaborate than the first time I put a clip-ins file on demo reel for journalism school. This was, I had like real TV items on it. And, I had to write a bunch of essays. I had to write a news test. And, I applied, and about 3 months later, I found out I got accepted. Yeah. And then about a week after that, I found out that I also got a full tuition scholarship to attend.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And, in the United States, the full tuition scholarships are, they're pretty hefty. At the time, it's bigger now, but this was like about $38,000 US.
Wow.
Yeah. So this was something I could not turn down. So I took an education leave from my job at APTN and went to New York. And, with that program there, at this point in my career, I worked in print, I worked in radio, I worked in television. The new thing that was coming up at that time was online. And I didn't have any online skills. So I thought, well, I'll go get my master's degree. I'll concentrate in online journalism, get a bunch of online skills, and then come back to my job. Well, while I was at Columbia, part of the being in the online program is that you have to take part and sit in on seminars. And one of them is a sort of a panel discussion on the changing media landscape, where they had panelists like from Jimmy Wales from Wikipedia was there. Kevin Seitz, who did a documentary and a story about being in the hot zone, who covered war for a year for Yahoo News. There was another person who started her own niche news website on security filings. It was just very specific security filings, but she did that. And a lot of them talked about their own ways about how they were supporting the work they were doing. Like Kevin Seitz said he convinced Yahoo to give him $1 million to cover conflict in the world for a year. So with that money, he was actually able to travel the world and hire a news team to put all of his news stories and video and photographs and audio up on the website while he was in the field covering stories. You know, the woman who had the blog on security filings, she said she just ran some ads on her website and that was making enough money for her to pay the bills. And that kept her happy. You know, of course, with Wikipedia, they work on, you know, donations. They have a yearly drive on donations that support the work, you know, the small team does theirs. So when I was listening to all of this, it just kind of occurred to me, like, and it comes back to where I was talking about wanting to be the editor of MAAT News. Well, when I was sitting there, I was thinking, you know, if these people can do their own websites and cover the stories that they want to do, why can't I do that? You know, why can't I start my own news website? So after listening to these individuals talk about the work that they're doing, I went back to my apartment and excuse me, and started Googling to see if anybody in this region was covering Indigenous issues. Excuse me.
Yeah.
And I couldn't find anybody. Nobody was doing it in this region. I mean, even at the time, EPTN didn't even really have a functioning news website other than, excuse me, other than saying that they cover news. They didn't really have a place where they were showcasing news stories. So, you know, and it comes back that I've always wanted to be my own editor covering Indigenous news. And, you know, I was thinking back to, you know, when I got into journalism, I wanted to be the editor of MAAT News. And they said, well, why don't I be the editor of my own news website? So from then on, when I graduated, I quit my job at EPTN. I quit. And I decided that I was going to find a way to launch my news website. And that was back in 2007. I didn't launch my website really fully until 2015, you know, because I was learning along the way that, you know, running a news website takes a lot of work. Yeah. It's a full-time job and you need to have money in the bank to do it. So it took me that long to figure out that combination. You know, because I was doing contract work and I figured I would save the money on the contract work to support the journalism. Well, what usually happened was when the work was done, I paid the bills, there was not much money left. So I had to take another contract. So it was just this cycle. So I, you know, wound up taking a longer contract, saving some money in the bank. So when I was ready to really do the launch that I wanted to do, I would have some money in the bank. But what also really helped me at the time was you know, at the time I was a big fan of Canada Land. It's a podcast that covers the media landscape in Canada. And when I was listening to Canada Land, you know, they mentioned that they, you know, they support their journalism through a crowdfunding campaign on a website called Patreon. Crowdfunding campaigns are great. Like if you're just doing one project where you can get, you know, one-shot donations, but with Patreon, it allows people to sign up for monthly subscription to support journalism. Oh. And I figured that my website needed a combination of that kind of support, of that and advertising. So when I launched my website, I actually launched my crowdfunding campaign. And, you know, it didn't take off as I liked. It was a struggle, and it's just me and my husband. My husband is the photographer for the website. And it was really, you know, we were making some money, but to pay the bills, but it was a combination of advertising and my Patreon campaign, which was really low. And it was a lot of work. You're working on a very small budget, and it could be frustrating at times. But last year, when my own community, Sebaganagati, decided to launch its own moderate livelihood fishery, I wanted to go down there and cover it, but I couldn't because we had no money, or at least we would be cutting into our rent money in order to go and cover it. So I remember my husband and I were here in the apartment talking about, well, what do we do? And then I just went and put online saying, listen, we can't go down, but can people just tag videos for us so that we can try to cover it from here? And then what it turned, then later on we decided, no, we're going to go down. We're going to spend the rent. We're going to spend some rent money. We'll figure something out. Well, by the time we left that morning to go down to Saulnierville to cover the story, and by the time we reached down there, we had like hundreds and hundreds of people. I shouldn't say hundreds of people. We had several people donating hundreds of dollars to us so we can get down there. And people started promoting our crowdfunding campaign. And within a month last year, our crowdfunding campaign went from giving us $500 a month to giving us enough money to pay the bills and have a little bit of money to get on the road and cover stories.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, it just took like that one story and just telling people where we were. So, and now it's like, where do I begin? It's been great. We have money. We can get on the road. In September, we spent a few days in New Brunswick covering this, collecting video and interviews of fishermen who are from the St. Mary's First Nation in Fredericton, who are doing the same thing as fishers here in Nova Scotia are doing. And them telling their story. Well, I could never have gone and covered that story had we not had that money from our Patreon campaign, where we can actually spend some money on a hotel room, on gas and meals, because those kind of expenses really add up just for a 3-4 day trip. But we're in that position now, and I'm really, really grateful for that. And it's because of our supporters, the people who are supporting the journalism. It's been a really long road, but and there was times where I was really close to throwing in the towel and start applying for jobs again. We really came close. But for me, it's kind of like a dream come true. And it's kind of like, it kind of comes full circle to where I began when I was 18 years old and what I wanted to do.
I know.
So
it's your story, Maureen, is just so, it's inspiring in that you kind of knew, like back, like you said, when you were 18 years old, like you kind of, I can almost picture you out on a bicycle riding around with 35 mil and a tape recorder.
yeah,
And that's wonderful. And you've stayed true to you. And I know you said like there's been tough times where you thought of throwing in the towel, but like your story is inspiring in that you honored you, and you knew you honored you.
Yeah,
What
and
you
it's
needed to do.
No, and like I said, it's incredible. It's incredible, and not only that, I don't say it enough, but I am very fortunate to have a spouse who actually has the skills that complements my skills.
It's a
Who
beautiful
can
thing.
actually, like, well, he's a very talented photographer. A lot, I keep telling people the reason my website looks so good, it's because of his photography. So throughout this journey, I wound up finding a spouse who actually, who can actually contribute and be a part of my vision that I had all those years ago. Like he takes something off my shoulders. I don't have to worry about it, which is the photography, the images, the stuff that people want to see. On top of that, he also drives. He also helps with the marketing behind the scenes and the social media, so I can concentrate on the journalism. If there's so much work in trying to maintain that website, because my website got very popular to the point where it crashed several times last year.
Oh,
And I actually had to fix it, and I actually had to upgrade my web hosting package, which takes a lot of
oh,
time.
good for you.
It's a good
Good stuff.
problem, but the thing is, it was down, and I started getting people contact me saying, I can't get to your website. And I'm like, it's because everyone's coming to it, and I had to go find a solution.
Wow.
And yeah, but it's great that I have a husband who can actually help with all of the other aspects of the website, so I can concentrate on the journalism, and when the technical things happen, I can concentrate on that too. So so I really, like I said, I'm really grateful that I have him helping me and supporting me and being in on this 100% as well.
Yeah, yeah, it's a beautiful thing, Maureen.
Mm.
Thank
I'm
you.
just wondering if Vida has any questions or comments or anything that you want to put out there, Vida.
You talked about at 18
Yeah.
getting a summer job
Mhm.
and enjoying your summer with your 10 speed and listening to stories and so on. I just wonder, have you thought about, before you were 18, what you identified in yourself that led you to be on the path to journalism?
I've thought about that often, and it's just the house that I grew up in. Everybody
Mhm.
watched the news.
Yes, I grew
Um,
up in a similar
yeah,
home.
yeah, and when I was, like when I was 12, 13 years old, well, I remember even when I was even younger, when I was like 7, 8 years old, I remember my mother telling me, stop reading thin books, start reading thick books. So I started reading thick books in the library. And so when I was 12, 13 years old, again, she told me, you should sit down and read the newspaper every day.
Mhm.
And so I did. We had a subscription to the Chronicle Herald. We also had a subscription to McMac News as well.
Mhm.
So, and those papers were actually on the kitchen table growing up. And even when I was going to Hants East, one of my routines at the high school was, when you get to school, I went to the library and took a quick glance through the newspaper, just to scan the news. So I've always been kind of tied into the news, but it just never really occurred to me until I started working at Micmac News that I could be part
Mhm.
of telling the news.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
also at the same time, I mean, I just think growing up as well, I've always been attracted to good stories, listening to somebody tell a story. Stories are in books, stories in news articles, or even, stories that, sitcoms. I love watching
Mm.
sitcoms. And I focus on the writing and what it takes to write, to be that clever in writing sitcoms. I've always been, interested, one of the things I like about country music is the stories that the singers are telling. So
Yeah.
I think I've always been attracted to people and to listening and hearing good stories. But now, like I said, I'm part of the, not just listening to them, I'm part of telling those stories.
Yes, yeah. Which is a
Yeah.
whole other set of skills. That means you're not just listening, you're hearing what people are saying, and then taking that and communicating it through your story in a way that tells that story to many people. And I think that takes a certain area of expertise and practice, I'm
Yeah.
sure.
Definitely a lot of practice, a lot of listening,
Yeah.
a lot of writing a narrative, learning how to write a narrative,
Yeah.
the spine of the story, stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. I would say that you have a lot of overlapping skills with a therapist or a counselor, because a lot of the work that they do is listening and being a good listener, and doing research and you know, taking a lot of information and summarizing it in a way that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so, you know, maybe Margaret and you should talk. If you decide to change your career again, you could come and work with us.
Yeah.
So
Well, I'm not sure about that.
not that big of a change.
That's really heavy.
Yeah.
I think she's pretty committed to the journalism.
Yes, I would say.
And
Definitely.
has
Yes.
been since she was a little girl.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm 52 years old right now, so I figured I'm pretty much set. This is it.
Yeah. Well, I just turned 60 and I'm thinking of going back to school. So
Yeah.
Wow.
I
yeah.
know. Go by to go.
Yeah, learning never stops. I was taught in my family, you're a lifelong learner.
Yeah.
So
And I
Yeah.
should probably point out too that when I went to Colombia, you know, I was no spring chicken. I was, you know, I was 37 years old. So I was probably one of the older students in the program. But you know, like I said, I was going, you know, I wasn't the only older person in the program at Columbia, New York. But like I said, you know, you can pursue these at any point in your life, and you're still going to learn skills. Like I said, I never knew that going to Columbia and learning new media skills would lead me into starting my own news website. I didn't know that until I actually got into the program. Like I said, I just took an education leave from the current job I had. I had every intention of going back. But like I said, when I was in the program, things changed. Opportunity, you know, I saw another opportunity, and you know, I just kind of felt like I had to go for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes the biggest risks have the biggest rewards.
Yeah, tell me
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
Doing this website with my husband and I, like I said, we both left our jobs at the same time to do this. Yeah, so it was like all in. We were both all in for this,
Yes.
and like I said, it's a full-time job. It's not something you can do part-time. And I tried doing it part-time. It just didn't work out.
Yeah.
You know, if you're doing a full-time job and then you come home and then you want to, you know, do you really want to write? You know, one thing I've learned as I gotten older is I don't like writing in the evenings.
Yeah.
You know, I prefer to write in the mornings. I feel you know, it's totally different than when I was a student. When I was a student, I
Yes.
could pull all-nighters. I can't do that anymore.
No.
No,
Yeah.
I can't either. No. No.
Yeah.
Well, I think we could probably talk to you all night, Maureen.
Oh,
Yes.
and I can probably tell you all sorts of stories, but I totally understand about your time constraints.
I hope that maybe you'll consider coming back sometime.
Oh, definitely. I would love to come back.
And just thank you so much for taking time out of your day to come and share your story. As I said, it's an inspirational story, and it's such a wonderful example of just honoring that part of you that you know is there and what you want to do, and you stuck true to that. That's such an example, and trusting yourself too.
Well, I want to thank you, Margaret, for actually inviting me to tell my story with other people. I do love like telling other people about how I got here. It's not every day I get that opportunity to do that. So I just wanted to thank you for inviting
We're
me.
honored. We're honored. Thank you.
Very.
Thank you.
Yes.
So now what we usually do at the end of the show is I do a little guided, loving kindness guided meditation, and then we sign off. So you're welcome to hang out and listen to that.
Okay.
And it might make you want to go to sleep. I don't know. But we will definitely be in touch, and I'm going to send you that email for the open house.
Okay, great.
But thank you from our hearts for this
Yes.
time. Thank you.
Hey, well, you're welcome. And thank you for inviting me.
You're very welcome. It was very nice to meet you
You
over
too.
in the new way of meeting people.
I know.
Okay, so I'm going to For the next couple of minutes, just ask you to put all your stresses and all your worries up on the shelf. We're just going to do a short little loving kindness meditation before we sign off. So just allow yourself to be in this space, hearing the sounds in the room around you. Not having to control your breathing in any way. Just allow your breathing just to be natural. Begin to feel any tension you may be holding. Begin to feel that start to drain away from you. Feel it drain away from around your eyes, your face, through your neck, your shoulders, and down your arms. Feel the tension drain like a liquid down through your body and out through your toes. Now begin to feel your body fill up with love. Imagine a loving white light entering your feet, traveling up through your body, up to your stomach, to your chest, and your arms. Feel it almost bursting through your heart, your fingers, and through the crown of your head. And when you feel embraced in that love, silently repeat the following words to yourself. May I be free from all harm. May I be safe and protected. May I be free from all suffering. May I be happy. May I be free from all disease and physical pain. May I be healthy and strong. And may I be able to live in this world happily, peacefully, joyfully, and with ease. Now think of this vast world, the huge world with all its living creatures. Continue to feel that love in your body as you silently say, may all beings be free from all harm. May they be safe and protected. May all beings be free from all suffering. May they be happy. May all beings be free from all disease and physical pain. May they be healthy and strong. And may all beings be able to live in this world happily, peacefully, joyfully, and with ease. Send your love as far out around the world as possible. And just imagine that energy traveling through the earth. Continue to feel that love centered around your heart. Noticing how you feel in this present moment, in the now. Notice the weight of your feet on the floor. Carry this feeling with you through the rest of your day. And when you are ready, you may slowly open your eyes. That seemed very loud. Ooh. There. And something I forgot to say to Maureen, and I see she's still here, is that Maureen, you are Kate's absolute favorite journalist. I meant to say that while we were talking. So Kate, our technical director, you are her favorite journalist.
That's good to hear. Thank you very much. Kate.
Yes, I meant to tell you that. I had that on my sticky and I didn't get to it, but yes, Kate, quake. I can't talk. Kate quite admires your journalism. Yes.
Oh, that's so good to hear. That's really good. I love hearing that from people, that my journalism, reaches out to them.
Yes, she just put up a post and she says, I'm a little starstruck.
We'll have security around her if you come to the open house, though.
Yes. We'll set boundaries.
I'll definitely be there for the open house.
Okay, so we're going to sign off for today. Thank you again, Maureen.
Thanks for inviting me.
Ida. And everybody, take care of yourself and take care of each other and be well. Thank you.
Good night.
I've got something popping up here that I need to get rid of before I can close the window. What happened? What is this? I might have to call on Kate. Can you see me? I can't see myself because I've got this thing in the way.
I can see you.
How do I get rid of it? Kate. I can't.
Stop the recording. Can you do that?
Okay, I'll cover up the camera for a sec. What do I do? How do I get rid of this? I don't see the. I know, right? Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay. The mysterious Kate. Okay. There. Now I can end the meeting for all. Thank you.
Okay.
Have a good night. Bye-bye.
You too.